Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Yale. This is their part number 1109. This is a rim cylinder. This is shown in the 613E finish, and it is in a typical E1r or Para Keyway. This is what the rim cylinder looks like. Solid brass construction that's been machined, solid brass plug. The solid brass as the base material affords a very nice, smooth, long-term operation because of the architectural base material. They can put that material together. They put rim cylinders together using brass because it affords a very tight amount of machining tolerance, giving you smooth operation when you operate the unit. It's a hallmark of better quality locks, that's for sure. And so this is a typical rim cylinder. A rim cylinder is a cylinder that's going to look like a mortise cylinder, except it won't have any threads around the perimeter. Plus, it'll have a flat bar type of tailpiece. Sometimes they're oriented horizontally. They usually are. Sometimes they're oriented vertically. Depending on the lock type, it might be a better option to have it oriented vertically. Sometimes if I can change it, I will if I'm putting something together. An example of that would be a rim exit device where I have a TP trim or probably just a dummy trim would be a better example of that. You'll note that the tailpiece is kind of hanging down a little bit. It's hard to get this attached to the trim and then in the door, and that tailpiece put into the driver and the inside of the head of the exit device. So sometimes I'll rotate that clockwise because then it'll at least stand proud like this. It'll move this way, but it's a better chance of getting that into the head of the exit device. Some manufacturers offer basically a funnel that you can snap or insert into the back of the head case of the exit device to guide that in. If you don't have one of those, there you go. But sometimes that's a trick. This is only possible to have it in horizontally. These scored lines are meant to infer that you can change the length of this depending on your application. You're not just going to take pliers and snap that off. Those score lines aren't that deep. You'll end up bending the tailpiece, and that tailpiece needs to be perfectly straight because you'll note that when I rotate the key, it kind of flops around. Well, if you have a bent tailpiece, it will also move in that sort of position as well, or that sort of action, and that will make the key hard to turn because the tailpiece is trying to move, in some weird elliptical path. So you want to cut that as cleanly as possible. Should you need to cut it down in the first place, you very likely may not need to, but expect that you might. Being a rim cylinder, it's going to include a mounting plate and a couple of screws. Those screws are also what they might refer to as breakaway screws. Again, plan on having to cut this down. This you'll probably have to cut down. And then everything just gets put together with those screws going into the back of the drilled and tapped holes in the back of the rim cylinder body. This is in the E1r Keyway, the Para Keyway. It is the standard Keyway by Yale. If you don't specify a Keyway, you're going to get the E1r. It's called Para. Para is probably an older term. It's definitely it's an abbreviation of an older term. E1r, I don't know when they started to call the standard Para or Paracentric Keyway, E1r. It's been called that for quite some time. The word paracentric is used to describe this keyway. And that keyway, and I'll show you some photographs of it in a little bit that will allow us to look up closer to it. But you'll note that the keyway kind of is a zigzag sort of profile. The term paracentric means to cross the center line. So if you took that keyway and thought of an imaginary vertical line, the keyway broaching in the plug crosses the center line of that imaginary vertical line. That is what makes it paracentric. That is a intentional design of keyways that lends to the degree of security that a cylinder can offer. The more paracentric a keyway is, the greater it lends to its inherent security sort of profile. You'll note that there are high security cylinders and keyways, those keyways are generally highly paracentric. So paracentric that there's even been complaints in highly paracentric keyways that it's difficult for the client sometimes to get the key in because it's now a very unusual angle, is what it is. This is just kind of curvy a bit so that it kind of gets to the center line. But that's what the E1r looks like. This is a 6-pin. This is a 6-pin blank. You can do it in other lengths as well. This has the direct bitting right on the bow of the key, 456 545, stamped on there, a typical hallmark of General Builders hardware, that you'd have that information on the key blank. Not a really great key, but nonetheless, it's certainly passable. The typical Yale bow, just a round bow, is what's on here. 613E finish. This is an oil rubbed bronze equivalent. That basically means this is powder coated dark brown. Oil rubbed bronze is 613. This is a sprayed or powder coated type of finish. The plug would be in the satin brass finish. There are some instances where you can get a plug that will be in a color other than, and that's the plug. Other than other than satin chrome or satin brass. But in general, historically, cylinder plugs, regardless of the color of the scalp plate, which is the thin piece of brass that is finished, regardless of that finish, it'll either be satin chrome or satin brass. Let's switch to the screen view and let's take a closer look at some supporting information. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Here is the item that we are looking at. Let's take a look at some photographs that we have posted down below, and we will take a closer look at that keyway as well. There's the box. That's an 1145 tailpiece that's on the back of that. The Paracentric Keyway, single keyed SKD. It's standard key coding system. The standard key coding system. That's a format by which key symbols are assigned to locks and keys, or to keys. SKD 16, that tells me that when the factory ordered, when whomever ordered this is just keyed to the SKD 16 key. It could be keyed to other cylinders if they were also SKD 16, but that means it's specifically not participating in any sort of key system to the extent that it is communicatively keyed with other cylinders. It's intentionally keyed on its own. That's what that means. It's the 16th single keyed cylinder in the set. We could have ordered 20 of these 1109s and wanted them all keyed differently. So it'd be SKD 1 through SKD 20, that sort of concept. 613E, 6-pin. Okay, so there's the contents. There's the cylinder. That powder coating has a tendency to bleed into the, or lower the definition of the stamping of the face. There's the face of the cylinder, and here's a close-up of the Paracentric Keyway. Imagine that vertical line. That's where Paracentric comes in. Side view. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. And then continuing with our images, we've got the keys, we've got the front side and back side of the key. And then lastly, showing our screws and our mounting plate is what that is. Okay, now extended description information down below, not too much to really talk about. 1109 E1r rim cylinder. Let's take a look at the cut sheet that we have here. 1109, you have to define how many pins there are, 5, 6, or 7 pin. If you're not sure what you need, then I would say that it doesn't really matter which you order. And what I mean by that is if you're not sure, well, let's back up. If you're not sure what you need, You might want to find out what you need because it may matter, but it likely doesn't matter. If you need a Yale cylinder for a typical application and it's a standalone one-off installation, really 5, 6, or 7 pin doesn't matter. I would probably select 6 pin because that's standard for Yale. If this is part of a larger system, or if this is going to be added onto an existing system, existing locks with existing Para keyways, you will absolutely want to know how many cuts around those keys, how many pins you need. Because if you're going to be tying this into an existing system, you'll need it to be compatible. What I mean to say is if you have a 6-pin system or a 7-pin system, you would not want to order a rim cylinder that is either 6 or 5-pin because your keying system, the integrity of your keying system would be compromised, could be substantially so. And if you are, quite frankly, if you're not sure what you need, I don't mean to startle you to say that it is so crucial to know this. If you're doing a single cylinder, it doesn't matter. Order 6-pin, that will work perfectly. But if it's fitting into a larger system, then determine that, absolutely. The 1145, if you recall, was the part number on our box. That tells us the tailpiece. They call it a cam, the 1145 cam. That will be 2 3/4 long based on the fact that it's a 6-pin cylinder. You can specify this alternate cam, and in fact, the cam ought to be specified in the part number, so it should be rim cylinder 1109, the quantity of pins, the keyway, the cam or tailpiece number, any keying that's required, the finish, possibly handing. This rim cylinder is not handed, but you could certainly bump into cylinders that are handed, like hotel cylinders. And then, of course, the manufacturer. So let's move on. There's a link below this video as seen here to the manufacturer's page. From here, we can pull up not only all of the Yale products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation as seen here, but also a link to the manufacturer's website as seen here, as well as a link to the full product catalog. And I would encourage you to dive into that catalog. It is a few hundred pages of all things Yale, which means locks and door closers and exit devices. Other hardware as well. Speaking of that catalog, you might take a peek up in this section where we have lots of catalogs that are extremely old, antique catalogs. The oldest is from 1880. We've got one, a full catalog to 1937. A great era of hardware in the United States, that's for sure. Let's talk about Yale for a moment. Let's switch back to the camera and wrap up this video. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So Yale, it was Linus Yale Sr. who was a lock maker in the mid-19th century. Early 19th century, mid-19th century. Linus Yale Jr. Was an apple off the tree for sure. He was a lock maker. I don't recall the story between Linus Yale Jr., who became Yale Lock, and the father. The father, I think, wanted to focus more on bank locks. And I believe that's because where the money was. I think there was lots of money in security. And if I recall correctly, and forgive me if I'm taking some liberty, but in the 19th century, early 19th century, Adams is president, Jefferson is president, Madison, Monroe, as the country's developing to the point where Mexican-American War, during that period, the 1820s, 30s, Jackson, Van Buren, not in order, Zachary Taylor, the wealth of the country continues to grow. Therefore, a need to lock up valuables. So banks and bank locks, I would imagine, and I'm sure that I've read it, is where money was, and he wanted to focus on that. And the son worked on that stuff too, but wanted to go in another direction. So the point of me saying all of this is it's Linus Yale Jr. that literally patented the pin tumbler cylinder. This is a rim cylinder, but there are the tumblers inside of here are pin tumblers. There are different tumblers. Pin, lever, disc, or wafer tumblers. Anything that's a blockage, I think, is a tumbler. What does the key do? The role of the key is to remove the blockage. The depth of the cut of the key is related to the height of the blockage, or the height of the pin tumbler, in a pin tumbler lock. That's not the case. That sort of relationship can be applied to other locks, whether it be a lever tumbler or a disc tumbler lock, for sure. Or a tubular key. That's a pin tumbler lock, just in a different fashion. As would be a Brahma cylinder. The length of the blades, or whatever those tumblers are called, equals the length or the depth of the slots of the radial key that they're cut into. And every day of the week, every week of the year, we all use, most likely, a pin tumbler lock that Linus Yale Jr. patented. Now, he wasn't completely inspired without any sort of inspiration. He was. The Egyptians 4,000 years ago had a pin tumbler lock, so it's understood that he would have been inspired by that technology, but it's because of him that we all use this type of lock every single day. Anyway, fun fact. The name Yale is a company synonymous with the aforementioned material. If you have any questions on the Yale 1109 or any other Yale product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.